Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Prof Noctis weekly recap of The Last of Us Season 2. We are reviewing, recapping, analyzing, and way overthinking episode 3 of Season 2 called The Path. Evan, how you doing?
Well, hey everybody, buckle up because this one, not a lot of action as far as what we got in the past episode.
Which is probably good after the roller coaster of last week, you know?
Yes, that's true. I will say there's a lot of action as far as human interaction. Yeah. There's a lot of humanity in this episode. And this episode opens up with the aftermath of the Battle of Jackson, which is what we're going to call this, I think, where there's some burnt out cordyceps husks and Tommy is in what looks like a makeshift morgue, and he is essentially identifying a body, which we find out is Joel's. Because I almost did like a spoiler warning, but I was like, that's last episode.
It's so hard to get out of that mindset, right? Because we've been holding it close to the vest for so long.
It was a big secret, and
it's like we can't even talk about it. But
yeah, we've tried.
It's free. We're free.
Well. Yeah. We're free. And so is Joel, because Tommy says to him just simply something along the lines of, just say hello to Sarah for me. And that is just really just kind of an encapsulation and an end of that kind of storyline for Joel. That's his journey, that it was all kind of about Sarah, that Tommy knows that this is the finality, that he's finally with Sarah. And for me, it was a little bit emotional because it pulls from so much of that past, but they don't linger on it too long. And we have a 3-month time skip and the intro goes, and then we kind of get into the episode. So we won't linger on it too much either. But that statement is kind of Tommy knows Joel, and he knows that would be the thing that Joel is most looking forward to. Tommy's not worried about himself. He's not worried about loss in that moment. He's entirely focused on what Joel needs, and what Joel needed was to be reunited with his daughter.
It's a markedly different vibe for an episode start. You know, we've had some cold opens in the past that have been really action-packed and really thought-provoking. This one sets the tone for the entire episode of like, hey, this is going to be a grief, an acknowledgement, and a what now sort of thing. And then, Evan, I don't know if you saw this, the credits rolled. And then at the end, when the fungus kind of goes into, there's only one person at the end of it. Did you see this? They changed the intro so that the Joel fungus is no longer there, and it's just Ellie walking this path alone. Just really... Every time that intro goes, it's going to be like, just another reminder of she's walking this path, even though she's got Dina. It's her path. What a foreshadowing.
Well, it is. And you get this 3-month time skip, and we open up and we see that Jesse is just a hoss. He's so capable, swinging his sledgehammer. And they're clearly rebuilding. And so Gail walks into the hospital room. We see that Ellie has been cooped up. They won't let her leave. And whenever Gail shows up, you know that you're going to get...
You're in for it.
Some great conversation. Gail and Ellie have this conversation, and Ellie pushes back on Gail a little bit. Yeah. What happens here is that Ellie kind of tries to speed run therapy with Gail to just get out of the situation and the conversation. There's a quote that Ellie says to Gail that I'd love to get your thoughts on. She says, "Your final moments don't define your time with them," referring to Joel. Because Gail says, what is this? You know, I think your things didn't end well. What did you last say to each other? Did you patch it up? All the things that we as the viewer are wondering what happened in that night. And Ellie kind of says, listen, here's the deal. It kind of doesn't matter how it ended. That's not what I'm focused on, because our final moments don't define our time with people. Yeah. And Gail, as she does, pushes back a little bit and says, yeah, but they kind of do. What do you make of that interaction? What is Ellie doing here, and what does it tell us about her character?
I think that Ellie is trying to jump the gun on all of this therapy stuff. She doesn't need therapy, right? Like, I don't need it, whatever.
Guilty.
It's like, you need me to take more time? Let me think about that for a second. I mean, it is completely... This is something that we find with people that are kind of forced to go into these kind of counseling kind of conversations, whether it is me at a university sort of scenario or anybody. Like, most of us know how to say the right things in order to get out of the predicament we're in when it comes to like being called into the office or something like that. And that's kind of what Ellie's doing here. But Gail expertly is able to navigate this and really see through it. And she's not going to hold Ellie there against her will or anything like that. I mean, medically, they've had to do that because Ellie was going to be a danger to herself. Shoot, she may still be. But Gail is just saying, you know what? Like, okay, not as healthy as you, though, right? Like, that was probably my favorite line, maybe of the episode, when Ellie was like, there's a lot of messed up people in here. And Gail's like, not you, though. Not everybody can be as healthy as you.
Gail has a way of kind of mirroring and reflecting yourself back to you in these conversations. We saw it with Joel, and we're seeing it now with Ellie, and we'll see it a little bit kind of with Tommy later.
Tommy, yeah.
She's able to kind of morph her way in, and we do a lot of masking, especially in the apocalypse. Where we convey a different set of emotions or personality to help us endure things. We don't have time to even unpack or really talk much about masking, but it's something that Gail is particularly adept at doing, is the unmasking of things.
Does Gail work for you? I mean, she's kind of the biggest question mark of this season because she's not in the game at all, but it is like her role in Jackson working with you?
I don't think there's a more convenient way to get in and out of the internal character themes than to just have a therapist to push your buttons, because those are the curiosities. When I think about it from a story structure perspective, you can't make certain characters push the other characters in conversation directly to bring it up. Like, you can't kind of unearth the soil. You can't get past the surface using the same character that then they have to have conflict about it later. Because if you return to the same conflict in conversation with character in a show like this, it gets a little redundant. So Gail gives us this entree into a lot of these concepts that we're going to pick apart for the characters. So I think from a storytelling perspective, it gets us thinking in the right direction. It's a little bit of emotional foreshadowing almost. And so I like the way they're doing it because it tells us what to look out for. And then we get to see the characters live it out. And it gives them the ability to show us what the characters are doing, not necessarily have to tell us what the characters are doing and thinking at that point, because we've had this time with Gail. And it's just delightful acting again, that I think. So for me, I definitely see how it works, and I see how they're using it to get to a lot of the themes that you get to experience over 5 to 6 hours of interactions with these characters in the game. It's a quick way to kind of sum that up. So for me, yes, I would definitely say so, but it is expeditious in what they're trying to accomplish here. They're going really quickly to try and get to the depth. So if you look away, if you miss it, if you look down, we're moving at light speed here emotionally. So I think if as a viewer, if you're on board with kind of the emotional part of this journey, then this episode was fantastic for you. If you need the action to drive the conflict, if people need to be in physical peril for there to be tension and crisis and for you to feel energy there, this was probably a challenging episode for you. So recognizing that, I enjoy the way that they're employing her, but I also can see how this one might not be a favorite for some folks. What do you think?
I love her. Every time Catherine O'Hara is on the screen, I'm just like all in. And the depiction of her as this therapist that also has her own hangups and stuff, it works for me incredibly well, because she does care about this community. At the same time, she knows, like, she has a very specific role. There's a lot of things that are needing to be done, but she can't help them all. In fact, later on in that conversation with Tommy, she says some people are beyond saving. And that has got to be one of the most futile feelings in the apocalypse, when it's like, gosh, like the stakes have never been higher in history. I mean, like this is massive. So I love it. It also goes ahead and like gets ahead of the what do I want to say, the argument or the critique of like, Ellie just needs a good therapist. Well, she has one. And even now she's going about and doing her own thing. Right. So
every door and window to support that she could need to support her body's healing with her emotional and mental healing has been available to her. And she is choosing to not walk through the door, not peek through the window, and honestly, not even look at Google Maps as to where the address is because she has it figured out. And I think they do a great job illustrating that. I like the writing in this season quite a bit.
I like it a lot too. Even the like quick open once we first see Ellie and she wakes up and she's in this panicked scream. I feel like that's the realest Ellie we see in this episode. The rest of the episode is very much her on a mission, posturing, dealing with grief. But that guttural, that to me may have been the most heart-wrenching part. Just her screaming and that kind of choked up scream of remembering. Oh my gosh.
They're asking a lot of Bella Ramsey here as a professional because they're putting Ellie in a lot of nuanced positions. Yeah. And I think that it's a real challenge because I think in this episode you get probably 4 distinct Ellies. I would argue maybe potentially 5. We don't have time to unpack what those are. Maybe at a later date we'll be able to do that. But I think that what they're trying to do with Ellie in order to make her more complicated requires stronger characters around her to be able to help her get in and out of those situations because it's just we're not just following one character. Like, Ellie is our main character in a lot of ways, but this, much like the game, is a full expansion of that cast of main characters. So we've gone from a duo, and that was kind of what we always were, was a duo that's going to have these one-off little, almost almost like the Odyssey, like where there's just these little characters that come in, they have these moments in the story, and that's kind of what they do. They have Sam from this other things. They meet Frank and Bill and all these different things. There's characters that are only going to come into their lives for one episode at a time. We don't really get carryover. And now we have about 7 characters that we have to spread out, kind of walk with for the rest of this season and then the next season. So it's a bit of a corner turn. And I think it is going to be tough to make it believable with all the time skips and to make it part of Ellie's character. This is a bit of what they would call physically a setup episode. We just kind of have to get everybody to the right spots. And so I think they do put some through lines there, but also there are some times where I can see that what they're asking of the performances is a little bit straining to keep it focused and interesting. They're having to display a lot of different things, so it would be really easy to get lost here. So there's some of these quotes that I think really help us kind of punch through that we're going to be talking through, because Ellie interacts a little bit with this, but this episode really mostly there's just things that happen to Ellie. Her trajectory is set from the moment she wakes up in the hospital, and she kind of goes. So this episode to me is really more about all the characters around them and all the things that they set up here.
Yeah.
Which was a long way to say, So there's a conversation that happens here when Ellie is reflecting on the things in Joel's house. Now, this is an interesting moment that happens, and I don't wish this experience on anyone. This is not something that I think that anybody should have to go through. But I will say this is something that most of us, if we live long enough, will have to do. Going through someone's things. I think the wood carvings that he has are a really great symbol of his influence on the world that he lived in. It makes his space seem lived in. It's not just his clothes. It's not just the way that he put different things. Like it's the things that he saw inside the object. If wood carving and sculpture is bringing out what is inherently inside the wood, it was him healing and attempting to do that and use his hands to create instead of destroy. It says so much about his character, but Ellie really breaks when she gets to his jacket. And what it is about old clothes when you've lost somebody is that you don't don't realize that people have a distinct smell until you've been away from them for a while, and their things smell. And if nostalgia is rooted in the sense of smell, and that's what the science tells us, that's what breaks Ellie. So what do you make of this scene where she smells the clothes, she starts crying, then she hears a knock at the door and feels like she has to stifle it? It really sets up what I think is probably my favorite conversation of the episode between Ellie and whoever it is at the door. Talk about what this is like from a human experience and where Ellie finds herself.
I mean, she's going back to a place. I think the thing that really got me, yes, the flannels and the jackets and stuff and the smell and the way that Ellie breaks in that moment and the tears just coming down. But I think that the thing that really, really just is imprinted on me is when she went to her old room and she saw, like, I moved out. Like, I moved out into the garage. There's the bed frame, but like the mattress is in there, and you could tell it was her room. And she doesn't say a word, right? But like Ellie is just thinking of like, I shouldn't have moved out. I should have spent more time. This is what it really conveys to you. And Joel said it's a callback to the first episode when he said to Gail, I should have never let her move out, right? But so there's this kind of complex, complicated relational dynamic there. So it's just a walkthrough of this museum of regret that Ellie has here.
I think this is the one time that we see the real Ellie in the entire episode. Is right here. So when I was watching the episode, Ellie's character felt disingenuous. I was like, this acting feels a little off. Yeah. So if that felt weird to anybody else, you kind of have to think about this. What would it be like to be an actor who's acting like a person who's acting like a person?
It's Inception, right?
It's Tropic Thunder. I'm just a dude.
I'm just
trying to play another dude.
Tropic Thunder, starring Ellie.
But I think that is true, right? So I felt like Ellie's performative side was not believable, and neither did anyone else in Jackson.
No one.
But the moment at the house is the core of who Ellie's character is.
No,
and so if it felt like she was not being genuine, it's because the character to me was not being genuine. Yeah. So it was interesting.
No, it was terrific. And so that tour through the house was really, really emotional. And it is in the game as well, because you're actually walking through the house there. So I thought they did a really cool job without making it feel like a video game. That's always the task with an adaptation of like, I remember seeing, what was it? It was like a Doom movie or something. It's like, oh, it's going into first person mode.
Yeah,
this is such a video game.
Doom was the big video game movie. It was like, oh my gosh, we're Doom. And I remember sitting in the theater and then like the very, very end, because it was The Rock, right?
It was.
Yeah. It was The Rock. It was like in his Scorpion King era.
It was.
And it goes into first person, and my friends and I are like, whoa! It's like the game!
It is. And that's what you got to avoid with this. But also, you've got to take the source material for what it is. And they do such a really great job in this scene. Because that scene of walking through the house is such an emotional moment in the game. So anyway, glad they did this. And then to bring in the conversation with Dina coming up next. Now, you loved this conversation, so talk to us a little bit about it.
I did. So Dina shows up with cookies. Always a great idea.
Who doesn't love that?
Always a great idea. And Ellie essentially inquires, like, what are the cookies for? And kind of feels like maybe it's for an apology for something that she's done in the past. And Dina kind of says, no, the cookies are for what I'm about to do that's going to make you mad.
Preemptive peace offering.
So Dina once again kind of reads her mail here. There are people in our lives, if we're lucky, that we have that are like Dina, that know us well enough to know how to anticipate some of the things, but are willing to have those kinds of conversations with us and know that they're going to go better if we're not hungry. And so I thought that was a special way to convey some of their closeness and Dina's attention to detail with the characters. She says in this conversation that she was also close to Joel, and they kind of have that connection there. What is it like to have friends like that in your life? Do you resent it when they push you in those ways? And does it help when there's caloric offset?
Oh man, for me, I know that I reflect personally very deeply. And if someone is preempting that reflection, I need the cookies. I do, because it's like you're forcing me into a space that I haven't made time for yet.
You're forcing me into a space that I haven't made time for yet. Wow.
Yeah. And so the cookies help, right? And so it goes better in that respect. But I mean, that's me personally. And so like I my self-reflection and self-awareness is usually a precursor to a conversation that somebody's going to have for me. I'm usually going to be able to do that. And so people that know me the best are usually going to have a catalytic question for me that doesn't get to the issue, but it's going to make me reflect on it tomorrow morning when I do my morning reflections. And then we may talk about it later after I've really talked about it. So it's like, I need a Gail. That's what I'm saying.
Well, what a great... I think that's exactly what I found special about this episode is the ways that it makes me reflect on the Dinas in my life. And then when I am the Dina to my friends, am I bringing cookies? Like, am I just doing the catalytic moment and saying the thing that I feel like needs to be said, or am I trying to spend a little bit of extra time helping it to actually take root and be things? Because they have... sorry, did you want...
No, well, it reminds me a little bit. I supervise a lot of interns and a lot of students, right? And one of the ways that I kind of coach and mentor them is I go and buy them like a mocha frappuccino or something like that. It's like, hey, it's on me. And then we're going to have a conversation about it. But you know what? The frappuccino helps. And it just navigates that in a very lighthearted sort of way.
I'm trying to make a pun with frappuccino and the psychological concept of reciprocity. And so...
Frapprocity?
Recicino.
I like Recicino.
I think we can. You know what? I think we can do better. We don't have to workshop this one.
Hey, tell us in the comments. What would that be?
Yes, please. If you can find the right. If you were at Starbucks and the items weren't. Let's not even say Starbucks. Well, no, they go to Seattle. We have to go with Starbucks.
Oh, we have to.
So if you were an apocalyptic Starbucks and there were psychological emotional concepts that were part of the menu items, what would they be potentially, and how would you do a reciprocino? What would be your reciprocino, so that you could just trick somebody into feeling like they owe you something by buying them a coffee, so that when you ask a difficult question, they feel like they owe you an answer because you used $4.76 to purchase them a coffee. Therefore, you earn access into their life. Don't tell anyone our secrets. So if you know that, like that's the oldest trick in the book for mentorship.
If I have any students watching right now, it's not you. Okay, it's others.
We're talking about the other ones.
This is definitely not you.
Well, there's lots of people who need a lot of help in this town, Wade.
No, not you, though. Not you.
Lots of people that need a lot of help. The one thing that I will mention in their conversation here is that it's very deliberative. There are different conflict styles depending on different people. You have your own individual conflict style, but when you're in relationship with everybody, that dynamic also has a conflict style. And so it's through intentionality, effort, and reflection typically that we're able to identify what our conflict style typically is, but then a conflict dynamic that exists between us and another person. They are representative of a very deliberative conflict style. I think their conversation has the slow tone of people who really care about each other and don't want to respond to each other out of the intensity of emotion that they're feeling. This is very similar to how I get. So I related to this scene a lot personally in that way, because you may not know it from the way that I talk on our programming, but the deeper that things are and the more personal and emotional they get for me, I speak a lot more slowly. I speak extremely deliberatively. I do not go up and quickly in emotion because I want to make sure that I'm not acting outside of that emotion, and I don't want to do something that I regret because I want to be able to process it well. So I'm probably too slow to have conversations. I'm probably a little too deliberative, maybe a little litigious even, if I'm honest with some of that. So they got me good with this one. But they essentially determined that they're going to push to figure out what it's going to go. And Dina tells Ellie that she knows their names, that she knows where they are going, and that she's been hiding it from her the whole time. Ellie's upset, but I think Ellie understands pretty quickly. And so as we move on from this scene, we have Ellie now kind of canvassing and doing a little bit of politicking here, where she's talking to Tommy about what they need to do to get back. And Tommy talks about not acting out of emotion and like learning all these different things that he's learned. But he pushes back a little bit and he says, let's just not leave right now. He says he wants to have a meeting. And so for me, I think the enemy of any decisive action is a committee.
I feel the same. Yeah.
So from our experience, I understand the need for committees, but they are the antithesis of decisiveness typically. So he pushes to the committee so he doesn't have to tell her no, even though he knows that he could probably vote yes, but he's going to be outvoted, so he can support Ellie personally. And if that isn't politics, that like, hey, I'm going to support you personally, but everybody else, when we had a secret vote, is the one who voted no. So you can still have the outcome that you want, but be able to maintain the relationship. And that's politics, baby.
That's it. We love it. That entire scene, I know that we're kind of bouncing around a little bit, but the way that committee meeting scene opened almost gave me trauma. Because it's the guy standing up and he's talking about freaking corn or whatever. And it's like, and then the Jackson 5 say to him, like, hey, let's stay on topic. We've got the one thing today. It's like, well, I don't really care what we do about that, but I do care about the corn. And I'm like, you're the guy I want to choke out in meetings in the best way possible, in love, right?
Jiu-jitsu,
but
practice, sparring.
I want to jiu-jitsu you right out the door. But
well, so true.
It was so emblematic of so many meetings I've been in. It's like, not today, guys. Save the corn.
Let's talk a little bit about the meeting, because before she goes to the meeting, Ellie is really politicking.
Yeah, she's politicking. She is. She's doing the same thing. Yeah.
She's talking to Jesse, and she has this conversation with Jesse, and Jesse says something that I know is near and dear to your heart, which is pen and paper, writing things down, making sure. What does he tell her? And how does Jesse counsel her?
He just says, take some time. Write down your thoughts, okay? Don't speak out of emotion or anger. They're not going to vote for anger. So write down those thoughts. And you know what? She does. And it is so great. Now, I have other comments about that. But the words that she writes, A+, plus, it is just terrific, okay? But I love that because it really is a good, like, Ellie is getting good therapy from friends, from Tommy, her, like, makeshift uncle, and from Gail. She's got it all, and Dina. And still, that's the thing. People can change, but people cannot change other people. And I think that is the thing that I take from this whole segment.
Well, Gail talks about that after the meeting with Tommy, so I will definitely want to get to that. We want to make note that Seth is the one who stands up in the meeting. He's the one who said some very mean things on New Year's to Dina and Ellie after their kiss, and surprisingly, he's the one that stands up. Dina seems to really appreciate that. There's some illusion that they maybe have patched it up a little bit. Ellie is still furious and probably will never like Seth, and if they were alone, might kill him. And that's just kind of her character. But at this point, they have utility, so Ellie's kind of a little more utilitarian to go with our Last of Us and philosophy conversation. You can go back and watch our interviews there. And then the meeting votes no. And so they basically determine it's not a good use of resources. It's not what they want to do. And so we can tell at this point that Ellie and Dina are going to find a way to go do their own thing. So that kind of concludes the meeting. Now, in between that, we get introduced to a whole new cast of characters here that we have never seen before. There are some robed figures walking through a jungle with some ferns in it that we kind of would know based on that to be the Seattle area, right? This lush kind of area. And we meet the Seraphites. Talk to us about the Seraphites. They have scars kind of on each cheek.
Yeah, they don't
and
say
walking...
Seraphites in the show, in the episode, do they? It's just like robed people, right?
You know, you're right. You're right. So
yeah.
You're right. From the game, we know that these are the Seraphites. They're the bow and arrow wielding, whistling little annoying critters that you have to battle all throughout the game.
Terrifying and awesome.
But we meet them on the road. But the introduction that we get to them is interesting because it's not as harsh as it is in the game. Talk to us about who these folks are, what we learn about them in this context and the conversation they have. And I'm ready to go with the quote about their religious fanaticism. Whenever you're ready, you just call on me.
They are traveling, and they are clearly like a nomadic sort of people, at least in this segment. They are clearly religious in some of the things that they're saying, and some of the mannerisms and all that stuff, and yet they are also pretty aggressive, we might say. A guy's holding like a sickle. There's hammers around the waist, and so they know how to defend themselves and be aggressive when they're needing to. They've got their own communication system, and there's this couched sort of mentality again, or a scenario between a father or a father figure and a little girl, which is such a recurring theme here, father figures and young girls coming of age and stuff. And this one is coming of age because she wants her own hammer. And so it's like, okay, so we've had Joel and Ellie, we've had Abby and her dad, and now we've got this guy and his daughter. And I was like, there is just wild parody. So they're wanting to give us some kind of like, everybody's a person with relationships. Every group has interconnected relationships in there. Now, they get into your quote. So go ahead. Set loose.
Yeah, they mention a prophet. And
yes.
Then the one character says this. They say, a prophet isn't magic. They're just people that see truths hidden from others and share that truth with others, no matter the cost. And we find out that 10 years ago, the prophet was killed. We don't know anything more than that, but a nice mystery discussed on the trail to the Arboretum.
That's it. And we know because it was 10 years prior that it wasn't in Joel's rampage to save Ellie.
Good point.
This is one that was, one of the spared, I guess, because it seems like everybody we meet is like, who did Joel kill in your life? But this is not one of those moments.
Joel, no! Sorry, force of habit.
Sorry. So that quote to me is terrific, and it's impactful on a lot of different levels. So what viewers may or may not know is that part of my research was in ancient Near Eastern kings and prophets, and that's a great definition of a prophet. They're not necessarily people that are magical or even are able to see the future, but they are able to see things that other people cannot see. And that doesn't mean that they're mystical all the time or magical or whatever. There is some mysticism wrapped up in religious traditions a lot of times, but typically prophets will speak truth to power. They will speak clarity to obscured vision. And that is what apparently happened. And so you're hearing from a people that, at least for the last 10 years, may not have had the clearest of words. There may have been new prophets and all that stuff, but they're still talking about the one 10 years ago. So.
Interesting. Well, we'll put a pin in that one.
Yeah.
And we'll take it back off the wall when we learn more about the Seraphites. We'll try not to do too much conjecture, but this isn't the last time we will see them in this episode.
Yeah, we won't. Yeah.
And we transition from robed cult hiking activities straight into America's pastime, baseball.
Another uniformed cult-like activity. So... we trade our hammers for bats. So
yeah, that's exactly it.
I loved Gail yelling, "Number 9, get him, number 9." Like, oh, and then he fell. Oh,
she was all of us. Like, it's, if you haven't been to a kids sporting event and watched them play, like if you only ever watch sports on a professional level on like your TV and things like that, you gotta get out and go see some kids because anything can happen. It's incredible. And they're definitely enjoying that. So Gail is also sitting in the
She's
outfield.
in center field. I mean, it's like she's got her cooler. And I'm like, for RC, baby. Like, I'm in the action.
Yeah, she is. She has a good time. She's got some beer, of course, because she's going to have her substances.
Yeah.
And Tommy comes up and sits with her. She says, hey, listen, I had Tigers season tickets, which would mean that I think she was from Detroit then, right? So we get a little bit of information about who she is. Who knows if it'll be relevant, but Gail at some point lived in or near Detroit, which is not near Wyoming. Yeah. And so she and Tommy have a conversation about Ellie, and obviously they don't believe her, but Gail has this quote, and Tommy and her have a bit of a little bit of a disagreement about the definition of what a liar is and who her character is. They say there's a difference between telling lies and being a liar. And Gail makes some accusations here. What do you make of the way that Gail talks about other people to other people?
So, listen, I love it. What do I make of the way Gail talks about people to other people? I think that it is some broad assertions, but there's a really important thing with it, because she is also helping Tommy reconcile, like, okay, there's something deeper going on with Ellie. This isn't just like a moment of anger, and you need to understand this. It's not that Joel nurtured her into this moment. Like, there's something in her. So we can't simply correct the behavior. We would have to correct her. And that may be a little too much. And that to me is what really resonated from that scene.
Yeah, Gail calls her a liar. She says not only does she tell lies, she is also a liar. And I don't think that she's meaning liar in a sense that she just is deceptive for the sake of being deceptive. Ew. I think it is that masking, that facade, the acting like something else that Gail is referring to. In essentially, she's calling her unauthentic, I think, in a lot of her interactions. Right. And she says that she doesn't think that Joel set this path for Ellie and taught her how to do it, but that they were always walking that path in parallel together, which I think is a distinction that is important here. And what she says is, it turns out that nurture can only do this much. And she holds her fingers really close together, like it's really tiny. Turns out nurture can only do this much. So in the nature versus nurture argument, that is the general kind of metaphysical big question is, are we the way that we are because we're born and kind of shot out of a cannon with the trajectory that we have? Or can we change? And what is our capacity for change and adaptation against our nature? Not something that you and I are going to be able to fully explore in conversation here. But Gail does open the door. What do you think we need to pay attention to with that? And why does it matter here? And where do you land personally on nature versus nurture?
Man, I don't know. As much as I've studied it and learned about it and even like self-reflected for myself, the way that I think about it, though, is that everybody has a sandbox. Okay. And within that sandbox, there's a little bit of leeway, but there's really no getting out of that sandbox. The sandbox may be DNA. It may be genetic predispositions to certain things. It also may be the boundaries and limitations based on our family of origin, which is a little bit more nurture, but also like, there's a reason why when you go to the doctor, regardless of telling stories, they ask you about medical history that's void of actions of family members. So, okay, like heart problems in your family? Yeah. And I always want to qualify them. But, and they're like, no, we don't care. Just heart, got it. Kidney, we need to listen and look at these specific things. So I think what I'm trying to say is that we all have this kind of lane that we are in, and we can veer within that lane, but it's not like we can completely jump tracks. Okay. And so if Gail is right and Ellie has this sort of inner instinctual bent toward maybe, I don't know, rage, liar mentality, like maybe it is protective, who knows, survivor mentality, justice mentality, whatever it is, then it's not as easy as just restraining her, because she's just going to get beyond it. So I don't know. That's the way that I kind of think of it.
I like the sandbox analogy.
Yeah.
I think that this idea that you're within the boundaries, whatever the boundaries are, you didn't put any qualifications on it, but there are boundaries and limitations that will normally stay within. I guess my big question is, why do all the neighborhood cats keep crapping in my sandbox?
That's part of it. I mean, every sandbox has its fair deal of cat crap.
It is. If you ever had a sandbox growing up, it was the dreaded thing that would happen.
When you're making your little sand castle and you get it.
It smells so bad.
It's so bad. Freaking cats, man. So,
we didn't know that we'd go there today. I do want to go back and talk
that'll
a little bit about...
That'll be the thumbnail. Cat crap
litter box.
and Ellie. Tropic Thunder, Ellie, and cats.
It's only here. All we need to do is find a food analogy, and we're going to be set. Ellie does do a few things that I think are important to mention in her speech that connect to what Gail talks about that I think are going to be things that we need to kind of look out for in themes. Because normally this show delivers its themes with fanfare, infection, explosions, and like gnashing of teeth. But Ellie delivers them in a very calm, written down speech at the encouragement of Jesse. And she makes 3 appeals that I saw. She makes an appeal to justice to the town. She makes an appeal to family, that we're a sense of family here. And then she makes an appeal to duty, that there's a moral obligation that they need to do this. So I think that we're going to be paying attention to the themes of justice, the themes of family and how that connects to things, and then the theme of duty. So those are 3 things that I think they want us to look out for based on Ellie's words. So I think we've seen about all the calm rationality we're going to get from Ellie and exploring those themes, and I think we're going to see her actions live out what those are upcoming here.
This goes back to something that we said a couple of episodes ago, maybe it was last week's episode, where we talked about this is not a story of rescue. This is a story of revenge. And so as Ellie's going through this prepared speech, I'm thinking to myself, whoa, are they changing this to one about justice? And so when Gail says she's a liar, it's not about justice. And I was like, but I love that, because there can be some defenders to be like, hey, I'm Team Ellie on this. Go and take down everybody in the spirit of justice. But the writers, the showrunners, tend to be saying, nah, we're going to dismantle that pretty quickly. It's coming. So
yeah, it definitely is. And so we open up on the workbench again. We always mention anything from the game that's kind of overt. You spend a lot of time at the workbench upgrading your weapons in the game. And so Ellie, when she's doing her processing and when Joel was doing his processing, a lot of it happens at the workbench. I also think that's just true of a lot of folks' personality. I do processing myself by doing yard work and projects. You know that things are really, really bad in my life. Really, really bad if I'm listening to music that I listened to in high school and I'm organizing something in my house or doing a project. That is like the healthy processing response from Evan is that. So if you're like, what have you been listening to? And I'm like, Linkin Park, the early stuff.
Yeah.
Like some of them, the angriest I've probably been in like a sense, maybe in my adult life outside of some specific circumstances, I just threw on Linkin Park's Meteora and I reorganized my entire utility room and my workbench.
Oh, you're Joel and Ellie.
So I very much relate to that. We get a nice scene from Dina here. Dina comes in again, and she's just charming and adorable. And they basically realize they're going to leave. And so they make their plan to leave. She kind of lets Ellie know, hey, listen, you think you can do this on your own, you can't. We're going to change it up. Here's some supplies. I have some connections. We find out Dina's kind of been working the whole time while Ellie's been in the hospital to set up this and to kind of politic for them to have the support that they need. And then as they leave, Dina says, you could have just asked for me to come with you, basically. And Ellie says, no, I don't think I did. And Dina responds and says, well, now you do. And then she leaves. And I think there are those moments where we have that increase the depth of relationship, where we realize that there's certain boundaries that you want to butt up against with friends and family. And when we butt up against those boundaries and we don't want to be an inconvenience, we don't want to ask too much, we want to make sure that we're staying in our lane. And then that person says, Well, just so you know, this isn't a boundary for me. And that moves the depth of relationship. And it's those boundary markers that move deliberately through actions and conversations over time that I think are how we can know, one of the ways that we can know we're really getting deeper and closer to people.
Yeah.
And so I thought it was neat the way that they portrayed that, especially to bookend it with the cookie scene and then to end it with that. I thought was really well done.
I thought it was too. Dina continues to charm me in this portrayal. It's just a very different portrayal than in the game. I love both versions in Imaginings.
We get
Dina.
2 Dinas now.
We get 2 Dinas. It's similar to how we get 2 Abbies and 2 Ellies. I feel like Joel is pretty similar in both. There's subtle differences, but I feel like this really is a different imagining of Ellie and Abby and Dina, which I love.
So then they set out. They've gathered their supplies. They're going to take one horse, and Seth kind of comes back in. The door that they opened with him speaking up at the council meeting, they close with him helping them leave. He says, I'd go with you, but I got shot. Ellie looks relieved that he was shot and happy that he was shot. And they exchange rifles. So Ellie does not want to give up the rifle that she has, but Seth says this rifle is better just because we like details and things like that. There's a reason here. So Ellie's rifle was what's called a bench rifle. A bench rifle is typically heavier. It's meant to be sit at rest, and it's the kind of thing that you wouldn't want to like hike around with. It's meant for getting into one spot and being very accurate, and once you're there, you kind of post up. The rifle that Seth has, if I have this correct, is what I would interpret as a field rifle. A field rifle is just that. It's one that you would not use sitting on a bench. It's one that you could use standing. It's usually a little more lightweight, a little more versatile, and so it's the kind of thing that you would kind of take on the road. So it's kind of like your travel rifle. It's your walking around rifle.
It's your everyday walking around
everyday
rifle.
walking around rifle. So Ellie begrudgingly does swap rifles because she recognizes this as well, that one is better than the other. And so I think that goes back to her utility, because I think she doesn't want to accept Seth's help. No. She still very much dislikes Seth, but he's correct in that she's living more into that utilitarian mindset. Therefore, she swaps the weapons, and I thought that was relevant there.
Yeah, no, I thought that was terrific. And I'm glad to see this other side of Seth, and it's not a redemptive arc, but it does let us know that even though they have these fierce different ideologies, philosophies, there's a Venn diagram where they do overlap a little bit here. They're on the same side in this. In fact, I loved what Seth said when he said, hey, you're the one that used us language here. I was like, okay, Seth.
That's a great
in
point.
her speech. So I thought that was funny.
Yeah, there's nothing more venomous than using someone's own words against them.
Oh, it's the worst.
And so
if you do that, you should bring a cookie.
Yeah, and Seth instead brought a firearm, which is, I think,
it's the equivalent for cookies. So.
Those are the 2 paths to Ellie's heart, is weapons and cookies. I think it's perfect.
I love it.
So they get on the road pretty quick here.
They do.
And so just some quick math, it's about 900-ish miles, maybe 1,000, depending on the route that Dina described. Yeah. On average, according to the research that we found, you could expect to travel 15 to 25, maybe 30 miles a day with 2 people on one horse. So 900 miles, 25 to 30. We can assume somewhere between like 35 to 40-ish days that they're on the road to get to the outskirts of Seattle here. But when they're on the outskirts of the road, we see that they're passing the same sign that the Seraphites were passing earlier.
Hang on, before we get there.
What did I miss?
They visit Joel's grave.
Oh, yeah, that's pretty important.
That's super important. And Dina stays kind of away and gives Ellie her moment. And so Ellie goes to the grave, and this part was really tender for me because Ellie kind of bends down, and you're just kind of rushing through, like, what is she thinking? And, like, Bella does such a great job of speaking volumes without saying a word. Mm-hmm. And then when she presses, she drops the coffee beans on the ground, I was like, oh, that's so good and meaningful. And we want to bring flowers and stuff, but this is something that they had, right? Yeah. Her disdain for coffee, his love for it. And so she's giving him that. And I was like, that's beautiful. And so then she places her hand on there, and it's just this moving moment where you just kind of imagine, what is she saying to Joel in her heart and her mind? I'm sorry, I love you, thank you, or I'm going to make them pay. I'm going to avenge you. It could be any number of those things. And then gathers herself and goes. And it was just a beautiful scene to me. I loved it.
It was. I was at a conference and it was a talk on mental health and processing, and the presenter, whose name I can't remember off the top of my head because I didn't expect to say this quote, he said, "You can't avoid the truth just the day you deal with it."
Oh, what a great quote. Yeah.
And I think they referenced that they have to bury everyone 9 miles out of town earlier. I think it was 9 miles or some amount of time out of town. Yeah. And Ellie says, well, we'll go visit the grave. I don't want to go visit the grave right now. Yeah. We'll do it on the way out. When we go to Seattle, then we'll visit the grave. And so we talk a lot about the way that you can snooze emotions and trauma, and that's very much a snooze, which you can do, but that alarm will come back around, because I do believe that you can't avoid the truth just the day you deal with it. And we see Ellie fulfill that commitment and have that kind of moment that you kind of point out at the grave. So thanks for bringing that up.
One other parallel is that it is a great mirroring of the scene with Abby at her dad's grave, and the words that Abby says in that moment of, we're going to do it slowly, right? We're going to make him pay. And she's kind of saying this. It's almost the unspoken echo with this scene with Ellie. And it's like, okay, like, yes, there's a lot of love there, but there's also like, we're on a crash course with revenge. So,
we are big time. And speaking of crash, there was a cart that we know that the Seraphites were pulling that has crashed and overturned on this trail as Dina and Ellie stumble upon a scene. What is it they find, and what is their reaction, and what does that tell us about this part of the story? And so, I know that we're introduced to this in a different way than we were in the game, so there's a little bit to talk about here.
To me, this was... It felt like more of a departure thematically than it is in the game. And the reason that I say that is because here, maybe it's because I'm chronically online and I'm always reading things, but people had a huge issue with Abby's monologue last week, saying they're giving the lead too early, right? It's like, we're not supposed to know that Abby's like dad. Like, we just are supposed to think of Abby as this like killer of Joel, and you're supposed to hate her immediately and not really have any sympathy. And that comes later on. And so the fear was, how are we going to have Abby evoke sympathy? Like, how can we hate her when we are already knowing a little bit of her justification? Well, here it's really interesting, because we see that the group that she is with, from Ellie's perspective, like, it's more than Joel. This is like everybody. They are killing everybody. Children. They have no care or concern for human life. And it may have been retaliatory towards Joel, but it doesn't matter, because they are killers. And therefore, it gives it a little bit more credence to the lie that Ellie is believing, that this is about justice. So to me, this was probably the scene that is going to stay with me the most, just because of the way that it reinforces the crusade that Ellie is on.
I don't know if I'm quite there as far as the definitive nature of their motivations yet. I think that that's probably something that's going to be teased out for a while. So I think that they are kind of making things complicated in layers. And I'm curious. I definitely think everything that you have said is definitely there and possible. I'm not sure what they're subverting from the game and what they're not. It's kind of hard for me to know where to separate it, and then really kind of where a spoiler would be compared to where they're going and where it's not. So if you're listening to this and watching it, we're trying to be very cognizant of where this heads. But for those who have played the game, we also want to recognize that you recognize this to be a little different. So they might be changing some of the trajectory of this people group and what they're doing and what they're about. They've certainly been initially portrayed as extremely innocent and extremely wholesome, almost, and victims. That is what's happened here, is that in this scenario, from what we know and only what the show has shown us, these individuals who we don't know their names, they are clearly religious, and they are victims in this particular scenario.
Yeah.
We'll see what they do with that in the future, and I'll leave that.
Yeah, like, to me, it really is just, from Ellie's limited perspective, like, they kill children, right? Like, and that's all we really need to know at this point. And I kind of wonder, I'm so excited and concerned for when my mom watches this episode, because I just am so curious about what her take is going to be on all of this, because she has no concept of literally anything else. And that to me is such an interesting take. It's like, oh.
There's a few folks that have no idea what's happening in the game that I know are watching along with us, and we're talking about it kind of week to week. So I am interested to hear your takes. For those of you who I know that we're talking about this regularly. So it's good. We're trying to be sensitive to it. But I think that is a really unique perspective. And I think it's a really important perspective for everyone to have, especially people who are closest to the game. Because if this game was important to you and you liked this game and it was something, one, you had to fight for in online discourse because it was not well received when it first came out because of some of the story decisions that people didn't really enjoy. And which I would argue is even more evidence that they accomplished their goals with the story that they set out to tell. But that's a tale for another time. That perspective of no game context and just what the show has shown is important. It's okay to have preference on either side, right? Obviously. But it is a self-contained TV show. It is not a companion to a video game. It is its own independent story. It is not an extension of the game. It is not a DLC. It is literally its own story that it is telling that is inspired by the story of the game. And I think it's important to separate those lanes so that you can enjoy them both and let them be what they are. I agree. But that's clearly kind of my take. So Dina is sickened by this and kind of mentions it. She says, I don't really kind of know what happened, but like it's the seeing the children and all the blood. And she said it was maybe the smell. She's very disgusted. So she kind of retches a little bit and she's a little off put by that. You know, she's seen some things in the apocalypse, but there's something about this scenario that really kind of bugged her and unsettled her stomach in some ways. So we'll see, if that's what they're doing with that. And then we find out that they're kind of 9 miles out from Seattle, and that we see Manny, who is one of the characters that was with the party that came into Jackson. And he's up on a watchtower, and I think it's the Seattle Space Needle that he's inside with binoculars and a sniper rifle. And they talk about a FOB, which is a forward operating base. It's the acronym. It's a military term for this is their kind of safe point that we're going to conduct forward operations out of. And it's something that you would use in a war as like a front. So the front of a war is where the battle happens. The idea is that you want to have a line and a manageable front so that you don't get surrounded on all sides. So you kind of systematically move and create these battle lines. So you create these forward operating bases or FOBs, which are places that are defensible that you can keep supplies and kind of operate from. So we know that they have some level of military precision. We see some motorized vehicles kind of roll through, and then an army of people who seem very well equipped kind of marching down the street. And we assume that they're the ones who are chasing after the folks in the robes. And we know that the folks in the robes had hammers and bows and arrows. So it leads you to question what could have transpired here with such a mismatch in power for them to be so vehemently against each other here. What's going on? What did you make of that, and where do you think we're headed as this episode kind of ends with anticipation of something grand happening?
I think, to me, I mean, that last scene was pretty cutting, because like I'm trying to imagine what I'm learning as they give it to me in the show, right? And so in the tent, when Dina and Ellie are having these conversations, kind of reflecting and all this stuff, also just fascinating discussions they're having there about their own relationship and stuff. But they're talking briefly about, maybe there's not very many wolf members left and stuff. There's not very many. And Ellie even says there's about to be even less, right, when we go in there. So this final shot is meant to evoke like, oh, they are underestimating what they're up against. These guys have armored vehicles. They have like legions and squadrons of soldiers. And so Ellie and Dina, there's imminent peril that they are walking into unsuspectingly. And that's what it really conjured in me. Like, they're organized. These are military. And Ellie and Dina are... it's going to be rough, is what I was thinking. So,
well, they're headed into a war zone.
They are, and they're not ready for that.
Well, and I'm looking forward to the next episode. As far as setup episodes and getting everybody in the right place and setting the stage for what themes we're gonna explore and look at, I thought it was another well done episode that was concise in its execution of that. So I think we're well prepared for what might transpire next. So those are my thoughts for this one. What do we have going on next, and what do you want to close us with?
Man, I like this episode. It feels like a connector episode, but it is so necessary. It doesn't feel like fluff or anything like that. It feels like there was a catalyst last episode and things are happening, but this is kind of the calm before the storm. This is the preparation, and all of the pieces are getting in play. I think next episode is about to blow our minds. I don't know. I don't have any predictions whatsoever, because this is a new telling to me. And so as much as I may know about the show and all this stuff from the game, I'm on the edge of my seat, just curious. How are they going to do this?
Do you feel like we covered the best of us in our discussion?
I feel
we
like
talked about it as we went. I think we did.
I feel like we did. I mean, I've got top 3. Gail. Okay, like and maybe cookies. I don't know. Like Gail, and cookies. Just wonderful.
I like the scene with. I like both the scenes with Dina. I thought that was really good. I enjoyed the committee scene. I felt very seen and heard in that. And then a lot of the processing. I think the Gail's conversations, that nurture can only do this much, is an interesting thing that I always like to think about. It's the kind of problem that you'll never get a really clear answer to. So I think that'll be good. Yeah, no predictions for me. I'm going to let this be. I don't think we can make predictions from this point without potentially risking some spoilers. So we'll just we'll let them rip because they did the big one. So.
Well, everybody, thanks again for watching. We are excited to continue the Last of Us lecture series. Remember, we've got recaps that are released every Monday after the new episodes on Sunday night. And then on Tuesday nights, we are doing a live lecture play of the corresponding segment of the game, which is... who knows what we're going to play through on Tuesday night. We're just going to go through the next little segment. I've got to figure that out between now and Tuesday night. But... because it's all out of order. It's wild.
What if you just play the audio from Gail and walk around Joel's house in the game?
Honestly, that might just be it. Now I'll have cookies on stream for everybody. So
everybody bring your cookies. That'll be great. Well, thanks everyone. We appreciate you tuning in, and thanks for the time.
For sure. And until next time, remember, when you are lost in the darkness, look for the light.
Look for the light.
Bye
bye. Thanks to Husky by the Geek for our theme music. Thanks to Nick Smith for our graphics. And most of all, thanks to you. This program is brought to you by viewers like you, and we really appreciate you tuning in. Thanks for taking the time to join us on this Last of Us journey, and we're looking forward to seeing you on the next episode. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.